Labour plans to renationalise the national grid, the largest transmitter of electricity and gas in Britain, and has published its policy blueprint for how it would go about it. But there's a big disagreement about how much this renationalisation would cost. Ruinous, say the companies themselves and right-wing think tanks. Nothing, say Labour and left-wing pressure groups. But we need to take a step back. We need to break down what we mean by cost. First, there's the transactional cost of changing the form of ownership from a private company to a public one. Second, there's the ongoing potential cost for the public, and potential benefits, of course, of the switch to a different form of ownership. These two things should not be mixed up. Let's think about the first, the transactional costs. The very large figures being bandied around derive from the idea that a future Labour government would have to pay market prices for the shares of these public companies, or even a premium. The National Grid's market capitalisation this week stood at £29 billion. But Labour suggests it would pay less than this for National Grid. The document from the party states, Parliament may seek to make deductions for compensation on the basis of pension fund deficits, asset stripping since privatisation, stranded assets, the state of repair of assets, and state subsidies given to the energy companies since privatisation. The Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell has suggested Labour may pay book value, the historic value at which assets are valued on the company's balance sheet when it comes to renationalising water companies. But the energy expert Dieter Helm says that the appropriate and fair price for nationalising such assets is the regulatory asset base. This is the price paid at privatisation plus the cost of the investment made since.
We have a very well developed system in Britain where every 5 years the regulator works out the regulatory asset base and updates it, and that represents what investors put in the first place and what investment they've supported since that date.
So what happens if Labour tried to pay less than this? Some say it would mean a costly blow to reputation.
There's a world of difference between the financial markets seeing the government decide that he wants to acquire assets and saying, OK, you paid a fair price, that's all right, we understand the rules of the game, and a game where you don't know if you invest in anything to do with government because someday down the track they may act unreasonably. So it matters for credibility, and curiously it matters much more for a Labour government that it has credibility with financial institutions than it does for a Conservative one.
Labour might be correct that this is the wrong way to think about it. It says the transaction will be paid for by issuing government bonds. This would increase the size of the national debt. Yet in return for those bonds, the state would reacquire an asset, so the net cost for the state in terms of the national balance sheet would thus be zero.
It's utter rubbish to say, oh my God, national debt's going to go up because they've nationalised this. A Labour government would say, we are going to acquire these assets and all the revenues that come to those assets by paying the bills. And we're going to back those assets with government bonds rather than private bonds. And in that sense, nationalisation is actually easy, and Labour is absolutely right to say there are very few general financial consequences to the government of swapping private debt for public debt.
But what about Labour's claim that nationalisation will automatically be much more efficient because there will be no more large dividends to pay to private shareholders?
There's a fundamental misunderstanding about what dividends are. You know, in any business there's risk. There is a cost of capital, as we would put it, okay? And dividends are a reward for people investing their money in it. The equity risk, the risk of things going wrong, will shift from the companies to a mixture of customers and taxpayers. It's a complete illusion to say, oh look, there's all this money being paid in dividends, we can have that for free, that there's a free lunch here. No.
Perhaps the correct way to think about the cost of nationalisation, not just energy assets but water and rail too, is to ask the question whether these assets will be better or worse run in public hands than in private hands. Would there be more green investment, more efficiency, better customer service? If the answer is worse, then there is a cost to the UK public. If the answer is better, there's a benefit. And some economists believe that, on the issue of nationalisation costs, this is where the public debate should be focused.